Good morning, everybody. This is Charlie's Angels, April 2023. We are pleased today to have a presentation on something that is very prominent in the news almost every day between TV and the New York Times, artificial intelligence. And Linda Harbuck, one of our distinguished members, has secured a presentator from IBM Corporation, previously IBM, and who is going to give us an outstanding presentation. We'll have a number of people joining us on this webinar face-to-face here, but we're recording it, and we'll place the recording in our Union Carbide Retirees Facebook page, and that'll be available for a couple of weeks, but I will always have a copy of the recording on my file in case anyone wants to access it later. So without any further ado, Linda, we'd like to have you introduce our speaker today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're very happy today to have a speaker, John Patrick, who is, I called him a Renaissance man of technology. I think that's not hyperbole in his case. John is an IBM retiree with 35 years experience. His last title was that of Vice President of Internet Technology. He formerly had many financial roles in addition. Since he retired, he has a second career writing and as a speaker on many subjects. He's written several books, 7 I think, on in the series all about attitude, and this is talking about the benefits of the internet and also artificial intelligence with respect to healthcare, voting, customer care, all kinds of things in banking and insurance and many other aspects. He is a founding member of the Worldwide Web Consortium at MIT in the early 1990s, when IBM at that time was not interested in the internet, and he had to go out and get their interest from the outside in. John has many other interests, which he'll touch on today. He's interested also in home automation, cryptocurrency, blockchain voting. And in all of these, he sees great applications for progress and positive influence on our lives. John's going to speak for a while, and then he wants to have our questions direct the conversation. And we look forward to hearing what he has to say, and welcome him now. And John, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, good morning, and thank you, Linda. I'm very happy to be with you. I'm just actually less than a mile from where Union Carbide's headquarters was for 18 years. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. I'd like to start out by sharing with you a picture of things that I've written about and why I wrote about them. And hopefully some of these matters, certainly AI, will cause you to have some questions, and hopefully I'll have some answers. It started for me back in the early 1990s when I introduced, as VP of Marketing, the IBM ThinkPad, April 1st, 1992. I'll never forget it. It was an exciting time, but the really exciting times followed that and had to do with the internet. You know, the early days of the internet were actually pretty boring, but when the World Wide Web came along to ride on top of the internet, and a browser was developed to allow people to surf the content displayed in the World Wide Web, that's when things really took off. And when I first saw the web, I'll never forget it. I knew right then, this is it. Everything is going to be on the web, and everything we do in our lives will in some way be done on the web. As Linda mentioned, IBM wasn't so crazy about this. And if you knew their financials, you would see why. One of the business units of IBM was in the communications business, and they had a system called the Systems Network Architecture. Union Carbide used it. All the banks in the world used it. It was a very profitable business for IBM. It was about $1 billion in revenue and almost all profit. And so when I came along and said, you know, we really should switch everything to TCP/IP, which was the protocols for the internet, that didn't go over very well. So my boss at the time, a very savvy gentleman, said, you know, John, you're not going to win this battle inside. You need to go outside. And you like to give talks, go out there and give them, and they'll find their way back into IBM, and people will start to think, wow, this must be true. I wouldn't believe it if I heard it from inside of IBM, but if I heard it from Business Week or Wall Street Journal that some guy named Patrick said such and such in Paris about the internet, that would have an impact. And he was right, and it worked. So I traveled around the world. I was chairman of the Global Internet Project, and we attempted to convince all the world's leaders to resist the temptation to regulate the internet. And I must say that was successful as well. One conference I attended is memorable to me. I was in a breakout session, and next to me, slouched in the chair, was a gentleman in a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. His name was Jeff Bezos. And what a guy. Jeff was a fanatic about the customer. The customer is always right. Whenever I say that, of course, I think of Stu Leonard and the big stone outside of the store, which says, rule number 1, the customer is always right. Rule number 2, if the customer is wrong, see number 1. And that's played very well for Stu Leonard, but it's also played well for Amazon. I don't know about you, but I have not run into any disgruntled customers of Amazon. So I was really motivated, inspired by Jeff. And I liked the way he thought about the web. And he saw the web as being for the people, not for the company. And the website's never been particularly distinctive from a technology point of view. It just works, and it's simple. And people, of course, have proven that to be the most valuable aspect of it. So I wrote a book about this called Net Attitude. And what I did in this book was to explain how the internet works in layman terms. What's the web? What's the internet? What's TCP/IP? Without using any technical jargon. And I also talked about the culture of the internet. And that's why I called the book Net Attitude. And I believed then, and I still believe, that all the major problems in the world and all the solutions to those problems are vested in the attitude. And so then I retired from IBM. That was 22 years ago. And at that time, I joined a number of boards, for-profit and not-for-profit. One of those boards was Danbury Hospital. And as you know, that later became Western Connecticut Health Network, and today is called Nuvance, with 7 hospitals. And that was a great experience. It was an eye-opener for me to be on that board, because on the one hand, I saw the compassion of the caregivers. I saw these incredibly brilliant surgeons and technicians and nurses and administrators. But on the other hand, I saw a world of paper, of Post-its everywhere, fax machines dominating, fax machines still the lingua franca of healthcare. And I said, how could this be? So I decided to really dig in and understand the healthcare industry. So at the age of 65, 12 years ago, I went back to school and got a doctorate in health administration. I wrote a dissertation. I did some research on home telemonitoring of congestive heart failure. And then I wrote a book called Health Attitude. And Health Attitude is about the American healthcare system and how it works and how it doesn't work and what to do about it. And as you know, there are a tremendously long list of issues and problems in our healthcare system. One that you may not be aware of is, if you think about causes of death in America, number one, of course, is cardiac. Number two is cancer. Guess what's number three? Hospitals. 250,000 people, one study showed, die from medical errors. And why do we have so many of those errors? And could AI have an impact on this? You bet. We'll come back to that in a bit. So Health Attitude was well received. And now it was time to write a third book. And I had an idea to write about home automation, which has been a hobby of mine for decades. And I was telling a friend of mine in Florida, where we live in the winter, a lawyer friend of mine, I was telling him about home attitude. And he said, well, John, that might be interesting, but you know what would really be interesting would be voting attitude or election attitude. I said, well, Tom, I really don't know anything about that. I've been voting for over 50 years, but I don't really know about the system of voting and the processes involved and how it works. And Tom said, well, John, you like to do research. You dig in and you'll find there's plenty to write about. What an understatement that turned out to be. And as I dug into this, the whole concept of voting in America, the most shocking thing to me to learn was that there were millions of people who were eligible, could vote, but they didn't vote. Why didn't they vote? Well, I found through my research that there was a very long list of why people who were eligible but didn't vote. And it has to do, in some cases, with their health, in some cases with their employer would not let them off. In some cases, they were tied up with family members and just couldn't get away. Some people can't get to the polls. Some polls were closed to save money and they couldn't get transportation to where the new poll is. They didn't even know where it was. It's just a long, long list. And so I started to think about this further and thought, you know, we all have these supercomputers that we carry in our pockets and purses, and they can handle encryption with a blink of the eye. And we have blockchain technology, which provides a distributed database to store assets, and actually a vote can be treated like an asset, and they would be recorded immutably. Immutably, it's one of my favorite words. So immutable, that means you can't change it. It's recorded. And so I thought, could that apply to voting? And I discovered there were startup companies who were actually doing it. There are municipalities, lots of them in Canada and other parts of the world, some in the US, not many. And I was sure when I wrote that book in 2016 that by 2020, we would be voting with our iPhones. Boy, was I wrong on that one. And in fact, there are 17 states so far have passed legislation to make it harder to vote, less convenient to vote. And so I was a real outlier by saying that, you know, with blockchain mobile voting, we could make it so that it was convenient, so that it is secure, accessible, and verifiable. Well, someday it's going to happen, but we're going to have to wait a bit longer. So then I moved on to home attitude and wrote the book that I had been thinking about for a long time. And I, again, put it in layman terms about what is home automation technology? How does it work? What does it do? What's the best way to approach it? Should you hire AT&T service, or should you get a system integrator, or do it yourself, which is the preferred method? And I justified why that was the case. So that went pretty well. And then my next book, number 5, was called Robot Attitude: How Robots and Artificial Intelligence Can Make Our Lives Better. Now, this was somewhat of a unique approach because there are a lot of books about this out there. If you go to Amazon and put in AI, you can spend the whole day looking at all the books that are out there. Many of them focus on the fears, the things that could go wrong. The day when the robots conclude, by the way, robots integrated with artificial intelligence, very smart people, well, people maybe is not the right word, very smart something, they may decide that upon examination, the humans have eliminated a lot of species over the thousands of years. A lot of species that used to be here on Earth, they're no longer here because of humans. What value do these humans add anyway? Do we need humans? So that's the scary part, the science fiction part. And there's really a lot to it. It's not just science fiction. There are a lot of things to worry about. And I point out a number of those, but there are, I would say, at least as many benefits as there are things to worry about. And these benefits extend across every aspect of our business and personal lives, every aspect. And you can see it happening already. So why is it that right now, in the first quarter of 2023, why is it that all of a sudden we had this exponential explosion of books, papers, podcasts, news? It's everywhere. Why? Well, I would say there are 4 reasons why this explosion is happening. First is that computers are getting incredibly powerful. The mainframes that IBM actually still sells, they're very powerful, but these computers we carry in our pockets and purses are also very powerful. In fact, a couple hundred times more powerful than the first supercomputer back in 1976. And so this availability at let's say an affordable price has exploded the compute capability in the cloud. Secondly, the amount of storage availability, the cost of storage has gone from adequate to almost infinite. The cost per unit of storage has declined exponentially. So we have an aggregation of computing power, storage power, cloud services, a reliable and fast internet. And number 3, we have people who are just so fascinated by this that the campuses in all the top schools, and for that matter, all schools, are really focused on artificial intelligence. And there are some brilliant young PhDs out there who are convinced that they can change the world through exploitation of AI. And the 4th reason is money. Follow the money. Well, right now there's about 8,000 startups, more than 8,000 startups focused exclusively on AI. There's an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal this morning about one. There'll be stories every day about new startups that are taking the existing technology of the large language model and the algorithms associated with it and the machine learning and deep neural networks. All these aspects of AI are coming together to radicalize, change, turn upside down everything, every industry. And a lot of it is very positive. So in my book, Robot Attitude, I focused on what are the good things, acknowledging that maybe in the medium term, maybe for sure in the long term, there's a lot to worry about, but in the short term, could we benefit from this technology? Could we make that 250,000 lives that are lost due to medical errors? Why are there medical errors? Could AI help with that? Of course it could. It could allow for more accurate diagnoses. Today, a resident pulmonologist can, using a digital stethoscope, make a more accurate diagnosis than a pulmonologist with 40 years experience. How could that be? Well, that stethoscope now has a little attachment to it that digitizes what it hears and sends that to the iPhone, and the iPhone sends it to the cloud, and the cloud machine learning algorithms compare that sound pattern that the resident had just listened to in somebody's chest and compare it to 20 million other patterns, and thereby match it up and find an accurate diagnosis, more accurate, in fact, than the 40 years of experienced pulmonologist. The same thing is true in radiology, where they're now finding in mammography in particular that there are certain very, very small and subtle variations of cancer that can be present that a human cannot see, but AI can see it And the reason it can see it is because it's all digitized and it's uploaded to the cloud and compared to millions of other patterns of the same nature. And so that's the general idea that's behind how AI can impact healthcare by introducing evidence-based medicine. I think it would be fair to say that today, much of the healthcare that goes on is what you would call, let's say, anecdotal healthcare. It's that 30 or 40 years of experience that is very valuable. It's invaluable, but it's limited to that particular person's experience. Evidence-based medicine compares what that provider has gathered about the patient and compares it to tens of millions of other samples, and thereby gets a more accurate diagnosis and also a more accurate prescription for how to treat it. This is happening very rapidly in all aspects of healthcare, and medical errors that happen by giving the wrong medication. Medication names are very long, as you know, and some of them sound very similar to some other ones. It's easy to make a mistake. It's easy to get the wrong dosage for a particular medication. Well, AI could overlook this and compare the diagnosis to the prescription and say, "Oops, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Check that prescription again. Check that diagnosis again." So healthcare, I would say, is the most hopeful segment of industry that could benefit from artificial intelligence. And I hope that the pace continues to accelerate, because frankly, healthcare has been slow to adopt new technology. One of the things that I'm quite involved in lately is called the Digital Patient Experience Executive Committee at Nuvance Health in Danbury. And the 16 C-suite executives, plus myself, we meet monthly, and we are focused on how can we digitize more of healthcare? How can we make it easy to book an appointment online? How can we make it easy to be able to check in online so you don't get handed with a clipboard when you walk in to be seen? The challenge, frankly, in healthcare is cultural. Okay, your appointment is at 10:30, but come at 10:15. Well, why is that? Well, to do your paperwork. It's cultural. That 15 minutes extra is built in, even though we may automate the online booking and the online check-in. So things are happening. It's moving forward. It just needs to accelerate, and I'm hopeful that that's going to happen. So that was the focus of Robot Attitude, was what areas of industries could it impact? How can it make us more productive? How can it reduce errors? How can it perform tasks that are really boring and in fact dangerous in many cases? Well, smart robots really don't care about that. They don't need a coffee break. They don't need a vacation. They work 24/7 by 365, and they're happy to do dangerous things. Robots are at this moment traveling around the floor at Fukushima, performing a very dangerous, potentially very dangerous inspection regime inside of a radioactive facility. There are so many more examples, and I wrote about these in Robot Attitude. And then the last book was called Reflection Attitude. And in this book, I put together a collection of about 100 articles I've written over the past 25 years in many different subjects. And at the end of each article, they're short, about 1,000 words or less, I would face up to it and say, okay, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? And how do I see the future of this issue now? And the subjects covered include motorcycles and aviation and various hobbies, ham radio, cryptocurrency, NFTs, which I'm quite bullish about, of course, Bitcoin and Ether, many aspects of that, healthcare, of course, climate change, many different topics. And that's been well received. And once again, all of these articles have been written in a way, hopefully, that can be absorbed and enjoyed and enlightening for the layperson. And I publish a weekly newsletter. I call it an e-brief. And it goes out every Saturday morning. There's about 1,100 subscribers to it. And currently, I've been writing about AI. And the new article coming out this coming Saturday morning will be about AI facial recognition in China. Boy, is that an eye-opener, no pun intended. So those are the 6 books that in the Attitude series, covering a lot of things that I'm very interested in and hopefully explain in a very understandable way. So now we've almost come to the halfway point of our time, and I'd like to use the rest of the time to dig a little deeper and discuss subjects that are on your mind.
Okay, we're all unmuted, so we can ask the question. Let's just be respectful of whoever else is asking at the same time. Since I'm talking, I'll leave it off. As you know, yesterday the building collapsed in New York, and they said the fire department for the first time ever are using maybe just one robot dog that's traveling in the wreckage to identify if any people are there, and they're also using a drone for the first time to fly internally. Is that the application of AI that you're referring to with robots that's currently being used now?
Absolutely correct. Boston Dynamics is one of the leaders in this field. And a gentleman there named Mark Rayburn was a mechanical engineering professor at MIT. And he had a focus on how our joints work, how our ankles, our toes, our knees, our hips, how they work mechanically. It's not simple. And that's why it's taken a long time to be able to develop robots that can actually walk. And Boston Dynamics now has robots that can do backflips. They can dance to the rhythm of a rock and roll song. If you go to the website, you can see some amazing things that these robots can do. And the example of the parking garage in New York is a good one. It is potentially quite dangerous to go inside of a collapsed building, which may have more collapsing to do. That's a perfect example of where a robot infused with artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, where a sample of data about a situation can be compared to many, many samples of information, of similar data, and determine what's really going on. This just reminded me of the Great Wall of China. I remember when I was in Badaling, on top of that wall, and I was amazed, of course, by the thousands of miles of length, but also by the height of this wall. And of course, it's thousands of years old. So is it possible that some of the stones are beginning to come loose and need repair? Absolutely, yes. Well, how do we inspect these walls? And the answer is drones. Drones which collect the data and apply machine learning to determine, is that particular spot coming loose and does it need repaired? And once again, machine learning is the critical thing. Take a lot of samples, a lot of data about the difference between a properly seated brick or stone and one that's coming loose and needs repair. So there are a lot of dangerous tasks and difficult tasks that robots and AI working together can make a huge impact on.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, there was an article in the New York Times, I think it was 2 days ago, that Samsung was considering dropping Google in their next round of cell phones. And if I read it correctly, part of it is because they think the next or a step change improvement in browsers going through the net needs to incorporate AI and new functionality that does not exist today. I'd wish to get your comments on what new functionality AI can bring to searching on the internet.
Well, I think what we're going to see is the concept of search has served us well. I think we could all agree on that. But when you use ChatGPT or Google's Bard AI, it's quite a different experience. I use them both. I prefer Bard. It can almost always answer the questions that I give to it. And what's different about it in terms of browsing is instead of getting a list of 100 million hits from your search query, it's going to use generative AI to produce a paragraph or a few sentences, or in some cases, a fairly long article with bulletized elements to it that gives you the answer that you're looking for. I envision this as being a companion to all of us in whatever hobby we're following, or writing books, or people who are accountants and lawyers or doctors. All of us are going to have this ChatGPT-like capability on right beside us, working in parallel with us, collaboratively working. Now, this brings up many issues about how many accountants and lawyers and radiologists are going to be eliminated because of AI. And the answer is a lot. But there are going to be a lot of new jobs created by AI and by robots. Those 8,000 startup companies have, I don't know how many people in total, but a lot of people. What were they doing before? So it's created that opportunity. So this gets really challenging to get your arms around what is going to be the real impact. Most experts believe that the impact's going to be big. It's going to be millions of jobs lost. And so it introduces a lot of interesting questions. How many truck drivers, there's I think 3.5 million truck drivers out there, how many of them can be retrained to become robot repairmen or windmill engineers or maintenance people, or something in healthcare? Or is it possible to elevate their capability? The answer is, for many of them, yes. Amazon loves to talk about the cases where they hired somebody as a package picker in a warehouse and who moves on to become a software engineer through their tuition program. But there's going to be an excess of people, and how to deal with that brings up a lot of difficult subjects, like guaranteed basic income, for example. Just saying those words immediately creates a lot of negative feelings from both Republicans and Democrats. It sounds like a handout and nobody likes it. But smart people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and others say, okay, I understand your concern. What's your approach to solving this problem? What are you going to do with that 100 million people that can't be retrained? And so fortunately, there's a number of experiments underway right now across the country in this basic guaranteed income. Andrew Yang's been talking about it for years. It's being implemented in a dozen or so places around the country, and they're gathering data to find out when somebody gets $1,000 a month, no strings attached, what do they do with it? Do they buy drugs or alcohol or fattening food? Or does it in some way change their outlook on the future? Does it inspire them to get some education? Does it make it easier for them to take care of their family? Taking care of people at home, by the way, is that a job? You bet it is. If you're taking care of a 90-year-old parent, or if you're younger and taking care of 5 kids or 3 kids or even 1, that's a job. So we have to rethink what is a job and what would the impact of these guaranteed minimum incomes be. So
going back further to your point, what about the educational requirements needed to get to that point? I'm talking about grammar school.
What are the
how does the education they can adapt to these new jobs? been speaking with educators, and they're saying that the amount of graduates coming out at age 18 is 70%. That's what it was when I was a kid. It hasn't changed. The children have problems with math. How are they going to adapt to this? Try to get kids to go into apprenticeship jobs over here in Danbury at the Connecticut Motor Works place over on Marybrook. Teachers have not, they've gone there, they've interviewed the place, and not one child has been even offered the opportunity to training program. It's 50 grand a year as an apprentice. What has to change in the society?
Well, I think we have to be innovative, not only with generative AI and machine learning and deep neural nets and all the aspects of AI. We need to be very innovative in how we integrate those things into various industry segments and aspects of our personal lives. But we also have to be innovative in how we look at communities and what things they do for their people. Years ago in Philadelphia, a Black minister named Leon Sullivan started an organization called OIC, Opportunities Industrialization Corporation. I was a board member of that group. And they had a very innovative approach to dealing with the young people in North Philadelphia who were not employed and in many cases not employable. And he set up a system whereby they would be trained in some aspect that was in need, and they would be paid. They would be paid to learn. This was unheard of at that time. This was in the early 1980s, and it was a great success. It reduced crime, it increased employment. It was an innovative approach. We need more of that. And that's Andrew Yang has been, I think, a good example of thinking differently about this subject. So I don't claim to have the answer. I don't think anybody does, but the best solutions, I believe, will be grassroots. In other words, they'll come bottoms up. They won't come from Washington. A lot of things will come from Washington, but the things that will be most successful, in my opinion, will be ones that are built from the bottoms up.
I have a question about trusting the output of Chat GPT, for example, when it can create plausible misinformation and even hallucinate, make things up. And it may not be obvious at all to the viewer, even if you feel you've got critical thinking skills. Does that mean you really have to challenge everything that comes out and maybe research it from a different direction? I think not everybody's going to do that if that's the answer, and a lot of people will be hoodwinked. What do you think?
No, absolutely right. I gave a talk at our country club in Florida last month about security and privacy and passwords and fraud that's happening online. And one of the suggestions I made was, don't trust your email. Be really sure that email is from who you think it's from, and hover with your mouse over the URL that you're being asked to click, and be skeptical of every email and never open an attachment unless you were expecting it to come from a particular person, and that was indeed the person. I would now say a similar attitude should be applied to AI. Yesterday, I was helping a friend. He was trying to, he had bought some USDT stable coins from a cryptocurrency exchange called Stormgain. And he wanted to move that USDT cryptocurrency into his Coinbase account, Coinbase being the largest American exchange for cryptocurrency. He couldn't figure out how to do it. I said, well, I haven't done that particular transaction before. I've done similar ones, but let me just give me a minute. I'll ask ChatGPT. Actually, I asked Bard AI first because I find Bard just a little bit easier to use and more accessible. And I asked it, how can I move USDT from Stormgain into Coinbase? And it understood the question and an outline. Here are the 9 steps to go through to make it happen. And I read those steps and I knew it was wrong because I've done this before. So then I asked ChatGPT how to do it, and it gave me the right answer. But it could have been just the opposite. So you really have to be skeptical with whatever you get back from these AI bots, these chat bots. And just think about this large language model. A way to think of that is that it's basically an accumulation of everything on the web, not just some things, everything. So to create this model, what they're doing, what Google is doing, Baidu in China is doing. Baidu, by the way, has 10,000 engineers working on artificial intelligence, 10,000, one company in China. So it scrapes everything off of the web, hundreds of billions of pages of information from the web. Now, we all know there's a lot of stuff on the web that is not true, some of which just out of ignorance, some of which on purpose, misinformation created purposely. It's called data poisoning, where you may have seen the article about this. Actually, Linda shared it with me. It was in The Economist, I believe, about how people want to influence what comes back from one of these chatbots by polluting, by poisoning the content of the web, by inserting stuff on Wikipedia that's knowingly, purposely wrong, to try to tweak what the robot, the software robot, what it comes up with. And that was the case, possibly in what I found. It was just flat wrong. One query I made recently had to do, again, trying to help a friend with something. And the answer that came back made reference to Windows 9. Well, I'm a Mac person myself, but if you're a Windows person, you know that there never was a Windows 9. There was a Windows 8, there's a Windows 10. There was never a Windows 9. So where did that chatbot come up with that? Well, it came up with it from a page written by somebody that didn't know what they were talking about. So there's a lot of bad information that pollutes the overall large language model, and the algorithm does its best to try to come up with an answer. But as Linda said a moment ago, sometimes it gets confused and it will figuratively hallucinate. Some cases it'll make something up. So we have a long way to go with this. And in the meantime, there are a lot of dangers of people believing what they read and acting on it, and which could result in harm to someone, could ultimately result in harm to humanity. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about some pretty dangerous stuff here on the one hand, but on the other hand, something very useful and productive. Yes.
Yeah. Two quick questions. One, same article that Ed referred to, they said that Samsung through Bing is liable, it looks like it's going to replace Google as a search engine because Google is not going to be up to date on AI. That's one. The other is, this morning I heard that there's a extreme shortage of airline pilots, and it's projected out into the near future is getting more extreme. Do you think AI will be a potential solution to the airline pilot situation shortage?
Well, on your first point about Google's been working on AI for many years, and they held back from the public offering these chatbots until ChatGPT took everybody by surprise. This was a non-profit company formed to protect humanity from AI that could be harmful. Elon Musk was a founder of OpenAI. Now he's written a letter along with the co-founder of Apple, Steve Wozniak, urging that everybody slow down. Let's just pause for 6 months, get everybody together with government people, and let's see if we can develop some guidelines to keep things safe in the world of AI. I was one of the 1,000 people that signed that letter. And I think it may have an impact. I don't know. I would like to be more hopeful. I don't think government is anywhere near. I mean, Chuck Schumer's talking about AI. He doesn't know anything about AI. This is the problem we have with cryptocurrency. We have Congress people that they just don't know anything about it, and yet they're being pushed to come up with regulations for cryptocurrency, to come up with regulations for AI. And how can we expect them to do it? Europe is doing it. They're so far ahead of us in regulation that's needed. I never thought I would see the day when I would be urging for regulation. And generally speaking, I don't like regulation and I don't like more government involvement. But there are certain things where government has a role to play. Government has a role to play in healthcare, setting standards for all the states to follow. And regardless of how they handle Medicare and Medicaid, do it the way you want, Mississippi or Alabama, but here's the metrics, here's the standards that are necessary to protect our health. So that's one aspect. The second question about pilots. You know, I'm very interested in that. I'm a pilot myself, and a private pilot, not an airline pilot. And you know, this is a problem that's caused by people retiring and not enough young people going into it. And so it's a very, very tightly regulated area, being a pilot. You have to get your health checked every 6 months, and you have to pass very rigorous examinations to prove your competency. The way AI could help, which was your question, would be in the training, to provide simulation, to go beyond what we have today as simulators, to create more conditions that could occur. And once again, it's machine learning. You know, it's capturing all the data from all the airlines, from every flight. You think about this black box thing. It's kind of absurd in a way, that the black box, in some cases, they never find it. It's on the bottom of the ocean somewhere, and they can't find it. Why can't that data be transmitted real time? We have satellites up there taking pictures and generating huge amounts of data, which has really changed what's going on in Ukraine, for example. Why can't we collect the data from an airplane? Technically, we can, but from a regulatory point of view, they can't agree. It's the International Airline Transportation Association, IATA. They're the ones that have to agree on what data is collected, where does it get sent, how often does it get sent. So we know it could be handled like telemetry. It could be continuously transmitted to the ground. And then we wouldn't have to worry about finding the black box because we've already got it. So if we can get all this data, these airplanes, and then create a large language model about that data, and then use machine learning to be able to compare a training incident with real data, could accelerate the training of younger pilots. They're required to have a certain number of hours. Perhaps that number of hours could be reduced if the training were more effective. So that would be my answer on that, but it's going to take a lot of time, unfortunately. It's just like electric cars, you know. Is it possible to have an autonomous vehicle? Sure. Technically, we have it now. I have a Tesla, and I have the latest beta software for autonomous driving. So the technology is there, but the regulatory framework is not there. And you can't do it without both. So we have to find a way to accelerate the speed in which government analyzes and decides and regulates. And that's a big challenge.
The call for regulation assumes that that developers have control over all the parameters of AI capabilities. But AI, as we've seen examples, even 60 Minutes this past Sunday, there's learning going on by these machines that is self-learning, that they're not being taught. And the developers really don't know how that's happening. They've even called it a black box. So, you know, if people are worried about the future, you can't control things that you don't understand, and that you can't regulate things you can't control. And my concern is this autonomous learning that, you know, China may have 10,000 engineers, but even have they discovered how the neurons are really working as a human mind?
Yeah. Well, this black box topic is very interesting. I would say in healthcare, for example, that's one of the things that's holding back the acceleration of AI. Because when an AI says, this is the diagnosis for this patient, and this is the recommended treatment for this patient, but there's still a doctor who is the attending doctor to that patient. And that doctor is going to look at this conclusion and say, show me how you came up with that. They can't. That's the black box. But remember, everything is done by the code. It's thousands of lines, millions of lines of code that are written in Python, for example, programming language. And they're written by humans. Now, some people believe, and there are instances where AIs can write their own code. So if an AI can compose a symphony and teach a robot how to conduct the orchestra to play that symphony, and if an AI can develop beautiful art, can it also develop software? Yeah, it can. But how does it do that? It doesn't come out of thin air. Humans have to tell it how to learn, and then it can go learn. So it's not as autonomous as it is sometimes described, because whatever it does, there's a human that knows how to do it, but it's at a very detailed level. It's not a high level discussion. It's down at the programmer level. They know what's going on. So it's challenging. There are a lot of things here to worry about, but I keep coming back to, yeah, so we need to be skeptical, but we need to embrace this on specific tasks to accelerate the training of airline pilots, or to reduce medical errors, or to improve the productivity of people that are working in robotic process automation in large enterprises. There's so much positive impact that's possible, that we should not shun AI. It's not going to go away.
There's an election, a presidential election next year. And in the 2016 election, there were many thousands, maybe millions of Russian trolls inserting divisive messages in social media. And they probably had thousands of people doing what now can maybe be done by ChatGPT. It almost seems like potentially there isn't a difference, only some of it may become easier domestically to do. And I'm concerned about people who have, you know, conspiracy theories and just general misinformation they want to insert for their own purposes.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big concern. But imagine if we could have an AI which spends its waking hours, 24 hours a day, inspecting information that's being posted, and using machine learning determine if it's misinformation or not. Wouldn't that be nice if we had that capability? And there's a lot of misinformation out there about vaccines and about various political things, and it's just bold-faced lies are placed on the web every day. And is there a way that AI could be the good guy, could be the policeman, could detect information which is suspect and present it to a human who could then say, yeah, you've got the evidence to prove that this is misinformation. We're not going to allow it to be posted to the web. We don't have that capability right now, but we certainly could. And that's where government comes in. You know, there needs to be some guardrails and some challenges created by some really smart people in government and in the area of technology. Elon Musk, as you may have seen, has announced that he's forming his own ChatGPT company called X, the letter X. He owns that domain, x.com. And his goal is to use AI to spot the bad stuff and to keep it away from doing harm. And that was the original intention of OpenAI, a company founded by Elon Musk and others. And he bailed out of it when they decided they were going to actually change from being a nonprofit to a for-profit and to monetize the creation of ChatGPT, which they've done. You know, it's $20 a month now if you want the advanced version. And they're making APIs available so that developers in thousands and thousands of companies can use ChatGPT under the hood to embellish their particular interest in banking or insurance or whatever, healthcare or whatever it may be. So he's got the right idea. How he's going to do it, I don't know, but I would never underestimate Elon Musk.
Well, John, thank you very much. We brought it right up to the 2 minutes before noon. I knew we would not have a shortage of questions for you. We appreciate your answers and bringing us up to date on something that I think we all see that is in the news, in print and on television, and obviously on internet every day. So this is quite appropriate and germane, and we appreciate you presenting. We have 15 people online directly, but when this goes out, it goes out to some 400, 600 Union Carbide retirees all over the country, and they can access it. So they can access it. If anyone asks a question, you can access it on Union Carbide Retiree's Facebook page, and I'll send it to Jane by WeTransfer, so it stays active for about a week on the Facebook page. It can be accessed, but I keep a copy on my storage drive, so I'll have a copy forever. I'll have it in my storage, so if anyone needs to access it later. So John, we appreciate, and Linda, we appreciate your securing John for this presentation. And I want to thanks to all the people that tuned in, and I'm sure we all enjoyed it. So John, thank you very much. And I'm sure
you're welcome. It's my pleasure. Nice to meet you all. We
may have you come back, because this is going to be a lively topic for some time. And with a lot of advances and new issues and so forth. So we all have another webinar at 12:30, so I have to download the recording in time to jump on the next one. So thank you everybody for signing on, and thank you again, John. John, if you want a recording, I can send one to you. Okay.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, very good. All right. Thanks a lot,
Bravo.
everybody. We'll be
Thank
ending the
you.
session.
Thank you,
Bye.
John. Bye-bye.
Thank you.